Nicole. I made this video just for you so that you would get a sense of what my work is all about and if you should choose to become a sponsor. And if not, feel free to share it with anybody else, and thank you very much for listening. So a few years ago I gave a reading at a high security prison, and I admit I expected to find teenagers all dressed in black with skulls hanging down their necks, and me dashing for the exit in my wheelchair. And instead, I was in front of a group of men, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, that had all arrived there in their 20s, spent their life in prison. They looked at me eagerly. They wanted to know where I was from, what I did, what I came to do. They were wheeled out into the garden because they were all in wheelchairs, not because of a premature birth like me, but because of a gunshot over a girl, in some cases resulting in murder. Wait a minute, in some cases? Probably in all cases, but let's not think too much about that. Otherwise, we might get into justice issues, because also some of those prisoners get there by accident and they're innocent. Where was I? Poetry is one tangent after another, but a meaningful tangent. So as I heard some of their stories, I thought they're gonna need cathartic poems, poems to get some of their despair out. But much to my surprise, the poem they most reacted to was The Moon by Jaime Sabines, and I'm going to give you a little fragment of it so you get a taste of it. La luna se puede tomar a cucharadas o en una cápsula cada 2 horas. Es buena como hipnótico y sedante y también alivia a los que se han intoxicado de filosofía. Unas cuantas gotas de luna en los ojos de los ancianos ayudan a bien morir. Se le puede dar de postre a los niños cuando no se han dormido. Pon una hoja tierna debajo de tu almohada de la luna y mirarás lo que quieras ver. So in this poem you see the moon as this wonderful medicine that has all these different uses. Their faces lit up, my own face lit up. Why was this being so powerful? I realized that the moon was creeping through the prison doors, entering us. And also that every sound, every color, every texture within the limits of the prison walls intensified, grew more vivid. And isn't that a great metaphor for life? That within our limits we can grow more and more vivid? Something is intensified by that obstacle. The moon, this place, our imagination, it's this place within us where, regardless of our circumstances or obstacles that are very real, we are free. It's a freedom that nothing and no one can touch unless it's consensual. What I hope my readings can achieve, and they often do, is provide a space, a reminder for people to access that moon, that freedom, that sense of light within the darkness. And I celebrate not just my own poetry, but the poetry of other poets that I admire. If you feel me pausing, it's to honor those inmates, to honor their silence and the intensity with which they listened. Because usually I have to butter up my poems with stories, with remarks, with anecdotes. They were listening so intensely that no remark was necessary. Poetry spoke for itself. I hope to listen to my audiences with that same intensity. You might think that because I'm in a wheelchair, due to a premature birth, that the hardest thing about being in a wheelchair is not being able to walk. Well, guess again. A dog that has never seen color doesn't wonder what it's like to see color. And a bee that can see beyond what the human eye can imagine can't even explain that beauty. So I haven't really wondered very much what it's like to walk. This is the reality that I know. I was born premature, weighing 900 grams, the size of a mango cupped in one hand, turning purple, trying to breathe, with death like a silver dog at my heels. I couldn't wait to know the insufferable ecstasy of the body's weight, and I insisted to drag any stars I could carry, even if their radiance almost burned me alive, as they protected me from black holes and vacant tides. Stiff-legged, panting and greedy for my life, I said, "Yes, bring it on." That's a fragment of one of my poems. So, the challenge for me wasn't not being able to walk or being born prematurely, but the uncertainty of my life. My parents have taken care of me for years, feeding me, transporting me from different places, taking me to rehabilitation centers where I exercise intensely. So, what the hell was going to happen to me when they would no longer be able to take care of me? What the hell was going to happen? For years, I could feel this pit in my stomach of anxiety. Not only what would happen to me physically, but what would happen in terms of my job. Because I can't exactly become a waiter or an English teacher in 5 minutes with the type of tired vision that I have. What would happen with my sexual life, with my sense of intimacy? I felt admired by people, but from afar. Every time that people would come from Tepoztlan to Amatlan, it felt like they were coming from a faraway place to visit me, from the next island over. I've come to realize that I'm not alone in that questioning. I've met many people in wheelchairs that reach a certain point where they are ready to live in a more autonomous way. They want to live beyond the parental control and love of their parents. And it's often the parents that aren't ready. One day I was browsing through my Facebook and I come across this notice that says that one of my students in wheelchairs, Maria, has disappeared. I wonder, how can a woman like that disappear? She has a very routine life. She gets driven every day to a rehabilitation center in Cuernavaca where she exercises very intensely. Then there's a special driver that drives her back home where she sees soap operas with her grandmother. And then she repeats the same routine again without much deviation. So, how does a woman like that disappear? A week later, her mother posts a notice on Facebook: "My daughter has been found. Thank you for your love and support during this difficult time." But when I call her mother, when I call my friend Maria, she doesn't answer. 2 weeks later, Maria picks up the phone and she says, "Akiwa, please don't believe what my mother's saying. I haven't disappeared. I've never been more found in my life. You see, I fell in love with a woman in a wheelchair too. A woman in a wheelchair that I met online. I started to meet her, to get more and more attached, and eventually to fall in love. When I told my mother that I was in love with her, that I wanted to run off with her, she went crazy. She went nuts. She even ripped off my shirt. She made everything happen so that it would be impossible for me to follow the love of my life. So I had to figure out a way of running away. And now I'm married to her. living in very precarious condition, but living my dream. And these two women, they wheel each other like two candy trains all around the house. It's so moving to see them. Through a grant, I helped them get funds, and I made an entire podcast of their story. So, one of the things that I hope to do when I'm reading my own poems and when I'm reading the poems of others is to put on the table this question of overprotection, to put on the table that moment that people with different disabilities come to where they want to live more freely, more autonomously. They want to have sexual lives. How do we get that world happening where that experience is possible for more and more people? Because I've also known cases of friends of mine that want that freedom, but they aren't brave enough. They don't have the resources to go out and chase their freedom. And before a pandemic, they're living in a pandemic lockdown state. Their parents are sometimes too embarrassed to let them go outside, or they simply believe that they don't have the resources or the emotional capability to be able to do it. Can you imagine having a disability and letting that disability shut you in for your whole life with your parents? I don't know if that happens that much in the US, but in Mexico, especially in the context of rural villages, it certainly happens. So we need to talk about how to get more resources for that reality to no longer be true. When I think of resources, I used to think of ramps, I used to think of funds. Now I think that the biggest resource or the biggest accessibility is the imagination. I put on a play a few years ago where I would visit this rehabilitation center and I got the different characters, which were themselves people actually, to play different emotions. This was before that movie of the Disney's Emotions came out. I felt like they stole the story from me. So the guy that was anger because he really in real life was always saying, "I hate this, fuck it," got to play anger. The woman that was very hopeful all the time, "We can do this. One day I'm going to walk." She got to play hope. The guy that was desperate. "I don't know when I'm going to find a girlfriend. It's just too much. Life is too difficult." He got to play despair. And I was in the middle of all those emotions, seesawing, as we all are, regardless of whether we have a disability or not. Suddenly, this woman walks in who is completely paralyzed. She walks in like this with a big smile on her face. And the teacher says to me, "She's going to have to be an extra in our story because we can't really give her a role. There's no place for her." And I say, "Extra? That goes against everything that I believe because my work is all about finding strategies, finding creative ways to include everybody, no matter what type of body they have." The night of the play comes. We hear anger, we hear sadness, we hear despair. Each a character, each a real person with that emotion very present in their lives. As we reach the end of the play, that student comes on, Anita, stiff, not able to speak, in her wheelchair, all dressed in white, but she's smiling, this huge smile on her face. She screams at the end of the play, a big joyful scream. "Ah! Ah! Ah!" That's the only thing that she can do. She is the silence that we all need to find to move towards peace. The curtain goes down. She's the star of the show. She's the star of the show every single time we perform that play. You see me pausing again to take that in. With one of her fingers, she gestures towards that CD. She has us play that CD over and over and over again. You know how I was telling you about the uncertainty in my teenage years and early adulthood, about how I was going to get a job, who would take care of me, how I would even move through the world, what would become of my sexual life. A lot of those questions have gotten answered for me by the process of writing poetry itself, by the process of writing and reading poetry. Because when you record your thoughts down, and when you record them in detail, and when you record them with an imaginative, curious spirit, a map starts to happen. A map starts to happen where we all start to be more honest about our true desires, our true questions, and as we come across answers, we start recording those answers. And when those answers are named on a piece of paper, when they're shared with others, they start taking more power. We become less alone. We become woven into each other, Nicole. And maybe that's why I'm reaching out to you, is that I feel in your energy. I don't know very much about what it is that you do besides Yansu and having a beautiful restaurant, but I do perceive that you're a weaver, and that ability to weave has gotten you certain blessings in life. Ooh, I'm past my TED Talk 18-minute limit, but this isn't exactly a TED Talk, so I want to end with a couple of more stories. So it's that ability to be woven into the world through the writing that has made me less alone. I often speak in front of crowds that have disabilities, invisible or visible disabilities, or in psychiatric wards, in prisons, in low income schools, in hospitals where there are people that have terminal illnesses. And I want to say, hey, here's poetry. Here's this very strange, subtle, beautiful form of resilience. There's also this way of saying, you are not alone. We all weave each other through the words, through our sharing of metaphors, of stories. So I wrote a poem that completely changed my life. The original draft of the poem was like this. In another lifetime I danced so hard and fast that God said to me, you have to learn to wait and watch and listen. I was very proud of that, and I showed it to my poetry teacher, Fran Quinn. And he said, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. Since when has dancing been a sin? You don't exactly look like a convict. There's not enough remorse in your face for that one. That's when I realized that I had unconsciously been seeing my own wheelchair as a kind of spiritual punishment or as a deficiency. He said, come up with something better. So I said, I bargained for this wheelchair. In another lifetime, a beautiful woman asked me to dance. To this day, I don't know if she was the goddess, God herself in disguise, a beautiful woman that I met in another life, or my own crazy dream. She said, if you keep dancing like that, your body will go up in smoke, and even your next body will be panting and exhausted from the spasms of our sheer pleasure. Sweetheart, I said, as long as I find a way to get up and keep going, I don't care if next time around I have to learn to hoist myself on paws. Forget pause, she said, smiling. The way we're going, You'll have more luck balancing yourself with the strong third leg dangling from your loins. And so the dance goes on and on. Eventually, that first cosmic body burns up, goes up in smoke, and she says to me, I'll give you a gift with an added surprise. I'll give you a wheelchair so you can keep dancing. Poetry will be your third body to dance through this world and the next. Poetry is a third body so that we can all say, we bargained for our wheelchairs, our visible wheelchairs and our invisible wheelchairs. We bargained for them. They don't put us above anybody, they don't put us below anybody, but they are a tremendous extension of joy, a tremendous extension of the dance. I provide all my audiences a space where they can express themselves, they can come up with solutions, they can also write their own poetry. While I don't have all the answers, I do have a lot of questions, and I do trust in the power of community to create some answers. That's why this work is important to me, Nicole. Thank you so much for listening. I love you.